Colin Mercer, a man whose hands bore the rugged testament of a life built from raw earth, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. At 42, his weathered skin was a map of countless battles won against the elements, each callous a monument to the foundations he had laid, both in concrete and in life. The merciless Denver sun beat down on his latest conquest, a towering skeleton of steel and ambition, when his phone shattered the momentary peace. "Mercer Construction," he answered, his voice a low rumble, laced with a kind of innate authority that had carved his legend across Colorado's sprawling building industry. "Colin, we must finalize the anniversary plans." Natalie's voice, sharp with an edge of impatience, cut through the line. 15 years, darling, demands something truly extraordinary. Colin sighed, his gaze sweeping across the cityscape, a silent testament to the concrete dreams he'd brought to life. "I thought this was settled. The cabin. Just us. The kids. Simple. But darling, I was thinking, perhaps we could entrust the children to my sister. Make it romantic." A subtle shift in her tone, a barely perceptible tremor, snagged Colin's attention. After 15 years of marriage, his senses had honed into a primal sixth. Something was profoundly, irrevocably wrong. "The kids are coming," he stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Sophie's been counting down the days for weeks. And Alex needs to escape the digital prison of his video games." A tense silence stretched between them. "Fine," she finally conceded, the word clipped, devoid of warmth. "I'll pack for 4. After disconnecting, an icy tendril of unease snaked its way around Colin's heart. Natalie had morphed subtly over the past year. Individually, the changes were innocuous. New clothes, late book club meetings, unannounced absences. But strung together, they wove a tapestry of betrayal he could no longer ignore. A widening chasm of emotional distance had opened between them, an abyss he now gazed into with mounting dread. That evening he pulled into the driveway of their immaculate Cherry Creek sanctuary, a home he had, with his own hands, partially forged into existence. Through the kitchen window he saw her, phone pressed to her ear, her back to him. A cascade of genuine laughter, a melody he rarely heard anymore, spilled into the twilight. But as his truck registered in her peripheral vision, the laughter abruptly ceased. The call ended. "Who was that?" he inquired, feigning nonchalance, keys clinking softly onto the counter. "Vanessa," Natalie replied, a practiced ease in her voice as she tucked a stray auburn curl behind her ear. "Just coordinating details for our return from the cabin." At 39, she remained a vision, her fitness model physique and meticulously curated style still capable of turning heads. Colin simply nodded, pushing no further despite the lie that hung heavy in the air. Vanessa was in Breckenridge this week. He knew because he'd spoken to her husband Brett just hours earlier about a potential renovation. He found Sophie in her room, a miniature whirlwind of intense focus, meticulously arranging her small backpack for the trip. His daughter, with her serious brown eyes so hauntingly similar to his own, looked up. Sometimes Colin felt she possessed an unnerving ability to see straight through him. "Daddy, can we go fishing at the cabin, just like last time?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Absolutely, princess," he vowed, ruffling her hair. "Just you and me at dawn, like always." His gaze fell upon a drawing on her desk. 4 stick figures, hand in hand, their joy palpable. But subtly, faintly, a 5th figure lingered in the background, a shadow. When he asked about it, Sophie simply shrugged, her small hand quickly sweeping the drawing out of sight. Alex's door remained stubbornly shut, the muffled thrum of his gaming headset a familiar, unsettling soundtrack. At 14, his son had begun to drift, consumed by the digital world mirroring Natalie's increasingly materialistic values. Colin knocked, but received only a non-committal grunt in response. That night, Colin lay awake beside Natalie, the faint glow of her phone illuminating her face, a small private smile playing on her lips. When she sensed his gaze, the phone was swiftly, almost violently, flipped face down. "What?" she asked, her voice laced with defensiveness. "Nothing," Colin replied, his voice carefully neutral. Just thinking about the cabin. It's been a while since we were all there together. Hmm, she murmured, a sound of utter non-commitment as she turned away from him, her back a wall between their fading connection. The next morning, as he loaded the SUV for their 3-hour journey to the isolated cabin near Grand Lake, Colin saw it. Natalie, in the hushed confines of the garage, engaged in a furtive whispered call. When she returned, her eyes darted nervously, her phone clutched in her hand, constantly checked. Sophie, a silent, perceptive shadow, clung to her father's side. In a rare moment alone, while Natalie performed a final house check, Sophie's voice was a barely audible whisper. Dad, I don't think Mom wants to go to the cabin. Why is that, Dad? She told someone on the phone it was a complication. Sophie's eyes, too sharp for her age, held a question Colin wasn't ready to answer. The ascent into the mountains was cloaked in an oppressive tension. Alex, buried in his devices, remained oblivious in the back seat. Natalie, despite the notoriously spotty service, compulsively checked her phone, a desperate connection to a world beyond. Colin drove, his knuckles stark white on the steering wheel, meticulously cataloging every suspicious glance, every anxious flicker of her eyes at the passing mile markers. What truly gnawed him wasn't simply the specter of infidelity. It was the chilling realization that the life he had so painstakingly constructed might be built on a foundation as treacherous as shifting sands. The mountain roads, ribbons of asphalt clinging precariously to the unforgiving terrain, narrowed as Colin's SUV clawed its way towards Grand Lake. Natalie, her anxiety a palpable force, grew increasingly agitated as cell service became a phantom, her phone clutched in her hand, compulsively checked at every winding curve. Perhaps we should have gone to Cancun instead, she declared, shattering an hour-long silence, her voice brittle. This place, it's so isolated. Colin's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. That's the point of a getaway, isn't it? To disconnect. In the back, Sophie's gaze met her father's in the mirror, a silent, knowing communication passing between them. She had been unusually quiet, her small notebook in her lap filled with urgent scribbles rather than the usual car games. How much longer? Alex grumbled, removing one earbud, his voice laced with the petulance of the eternally hungry. I'm starving. About 40 minutes, Colin replied. We'll stop at the general store first, stock up before heading to the cabin. Natalie's phone chimed, a fleeting kiss of service. Her reaction was subtle yet unmistakable. A sharp intake of breath, a blush creeping up her neck, fingers flying across the screen to reply before the signal, like a fickle lover, vanished once more. Work? Colin asked, his voice deceptively casual. Vanessa, Natalie lied smoothly, the word a practiced sigh. Just ensuring our safe arrival. The family paused at Willow Creek General Store, the last outpost before the cabin's embrace. While Natalie and Alex vanished among the aisles, Colin checked their fishing gear outside. Sophie, a small, determined shadow, approached, her eyes darting around to ensure their solitude. Dad, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I need to tell you something. Colin crouched, meeting her gaze. What is it, Princess? Sophie's eyes flickered toward the store, then back to him, wide with a secret too heavy for her small frame. Mom, she has another phone. I saw her hiding it in her toiletry bag. A cold, heavy stone settled in Colin's stomach. Are you sure about that? Sophie nodded solemnly. She doesn't know I saw. She uses it when she thinks no one's watching. Before Colin could delve deeper, Natalie and Alex emerged, laden with groceries, the moment shattered. But the seed had been irrevocably planted. As they resumed their journey, Colin's mind raced, a maelstrom of possibilities, none of them innocent. The Patterson family cabin, a humble structure lovingly erected by Natalie's grandfather, sat nestled among towering pines, gazing out over a tranquil lake. Colin had spent 2 summers transforming it, a labor of love, into a comfortable haven with modern amenities, while meticulously preserving its rustic soul. It represented countless hours of his sweat and devotion, a gift of unwavering love to a family he now suspected was shattering. After unloading the SUV, Colin announced, "Alex, help me check the generator and water pump." He then turned to Natalie. "Sophie, you and Mom can get the beds made." Natalie frowned. "Actually, I should start dinner. Sophie can handle the beds." In the utility shed, Colin tried to breach the wall around his son. "How's school going? Still struggling with algebra?" Alex shrugged, barely glancing up from his phone, oblivious to the lack of service. "It's fine." "You know, there's more to life than that screen." Colin began, checking the generator oil. "When I was your age—" "Yeah, I know," Alex interrupted, his voice laced with practiced ennui. "You were building houses and working 2 jobs. We've heard it." The disrespect stung, but Colin recognized a deeper, more insidious current at play. "Everything okay between you and your mom lately?" Alex stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just asking." "Mom's cool. She gets me," Alex muttered, his gaze pointedly avoiding his father's. "Unlike some people." Colin let the barb slide, focusing on the task, his mind reeling. Had Natalie been poisoning their son against him? What other insidious truths had she woven into their lives? Dinner was a strained, silent affair. Natalie, preoccupied, picked at her food, her gaze constantly drawn to the darkening lake. Colin watched as she checked her watch, repeatedly. "Early appointment tomorrow," he asked, his voice sharp with veiled meaning. "What?" Natalie replied too quickly. "No, just thinking we should watch the sunset by the lake after dinner." "Great idea," Colin agreed, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of dismay crossing her face. "Family tradition, right, kids?" Alex groaned, but Sophie's eyes lit up. "Can we make s'mores, too?" As they cleared the table, Sophie, a stealthy whisper of movement, sidled close to her father, slipping a folded piece of paper into his hand. Their eyes met, a brief, profound connection before she turned to help Natalie with the dishes. Colin waited until he was outside on the porch, under the vast canvas of the deepening twilight, to unfold the note. In Sophie's careful, childish script, 6 words confirmed his darkest fears. "Dad, turn around, now. Mom's lying." Colin's military training, long dormant beneath the layers of civilian life, roared to life. Assess, plan, execute. He needed irrefutable evidence before confrontation. He carefully folded the note into his pocket, his face a calm mask concealing the raging storm within, and rejoined his family. "I think I left the fishing gear in the car," he announced, his voice devoid of urgency. "Going to grab it before dark." Outside, he circled back, peering through the cabin window. Natalie was checking her watch again, her expression etched with anxiety. He watched as she told Sophie and Alex she needed to use the bathroom, then slipped upstairs with her toiletry bag. Colin made his decision. "Sophie!" he called through the screen door, his voice ringing with forced cheer. "Want to help me find the tackle box?" His daughter was at his side in seconds. Once they were alone by the SUV, Colin knelt. "I need you to be honest with me. What else do you know?" Sophie's eyes welled with unshed tears. "Mom's planning something bad. I heard her talking to someone about meeting at the cabin. She didn't know I was listening." "When was this?" "Yesterday," she whispered. "She said the cabin was perfect because you'd never suspect." Sophie hesitated. "Dad, there's more. I found text messages on her secret phone. She accidentally left it in the bathroom. It said, 'They were going to tell you this weekend.'" Colin's heart hammered against his ribs. "Tell me what?" "That she's leaving. With him." The betrayal sliced through him, a jagged wound, but Colin maintained his composure for his daughter's sake. "Sophie, I need a favor, a big one. Can you help me?" She nodded without hesitation. "I'm going to say we need to drive back to town for something I forgot. I need you to find that phone and bring it to me. Can you do that?" "It's in her blue toiletry bag," Sophie whispered, "the small zipper pocket. I already checked." Colin stared at his daughter, a surge of admiration for her resourcefulness warring with the crushing weight of sorrow that she had been burdened with such knowledge. "How long have you known?" 3 months, Sophie admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I tried to tell you, but you always said Mom was just busy with her new job. The realization that his 9-year-old had been carrying this crushing secret alone filled Colin with both crushing guilt and steely resolve. I'm sorry, Princess, he said, his voice raw, but that ends today. Back inside the cabin, Colin announced they needed to make a run to the general store for propane. The tank's almost empty. Won't last the weekend. Can it wait until morning? Natalie asked, her voice laced with obvious annoyance. Better safe than sorry with the night temperatures dropping, Colin insisted. Sophie, want to come along for the ride? As they prepared to leave, Sophie disappeared upstairs, a feigned trip to the bathroom. Minutes later, she emerged, giving her father an almost imperceptible nod. The drive back down the mountain was silent, punctuated only by the hum of the engine until they were well away from the cabin. Colin pulled into the empty parking lot of a scenic overlook, the vast expanse of the Colorado wilderness stretching before them. Let me see it, he said quietly. Sophie reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, unassuming burner phone. I'm sorry, Dad. You have nothing to be sorry for, Colin assured her, taking the phone, its cool weight a tangible link to his crumbling world. My wife wanted to celebrate our anniversary at her family's remote cabin. On the drive there, my 9-year-old daughter passed me a note. It said, Dad, turn around now. I made an excuse to stop in the gas station bathroom. She showed me Mom's other phone, and what I saw, it made me sick. The bathroom of the Willow Creek gas station reeked of pine cleaner and stale neglect. Colin locked the door behind them, his hands steady despite the tectonic shift occurring within him. Sophie stood sentinel by the sink as he powered on the burner phone. No password. Natalie hadn't anticipated discovery. The screen flickered to life, revealing months of conversations between Natalie and someone saved simply as R. Colin scrolled, each message a searing twist of a knife. Miss you already. 3 more days until freedom. Are you sure he doesn't suspect? Colin's clueless, too busy with his precious business to notice anything. What about the kids? Alex will adjust. Sophie might be a problem, too attached to her father. The most recent messages laid bare their insidious plan. Ryan Patterson, Natalie's brother-in-law and Vanessa's husband, would arrive at the cabin tomorrow night. While Colin took the kids fishing, they would confront him together, reveal their 2-year affair, and announce their departure for a secured apartment in Phoenix. Ryan, his wife's sister's husband, a man who had shared their dinner table, played with their children, accepted Colin's help renovating his own home. The betrayal was exponential, a cancerous growth consuming every corner of his life. Dad? Sophie's small voice pierced his shock, her innocent gaze laced with concern. Are you okay? Colin composed himself, shielding his daughter from the abyss of his rage. I'm fine, Princess. You did good. What are we going to do? Colin considered his options, the tactical part of his brain, honed during his years as a Marine before he built his construction empire, already formulating a counterstrike. But first he needed more intelligence. We're going to get some ice cream, he said calmly, pocketing the phone, and make a plan. At the small diner adjacent to the gas station, Colin bought Sophie a sundae while he made 2 calls from his own phone, stepping outside briefly. When he returned, his expression was a controlled mask, revealing nothing of the storm within. Sophie, I need you to be brave a little longer, he said, sliding into the booth. We're going back to the cabin and we're going to act like nothing's wrong. But Mom and Uncle Ryan... I know, Colin interjected gently, but sometimes in life you need to gather all the facts before you act. He leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. This is important. Can you trust me? Sophie nodded, her spoon pausing midway to her mouth. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit him like a physical blow. I don't know yet, he admitted, his voice rough. But no matter what, you and Alex will always be my priority. Understand? Back at the cabin, Natalie was pacing the living room, a coiled spring of nervous energy. What took so long? I was about to call. She stopped, the absurdity of her statement echoing in the silent, signal-dead air. "Line at the store." Colin lied smoothly. It had to wait for them to bring more propane from the back. That night, Colin lay awake beside his wife, listening to her shallow breathing, wondering how many nights she had lain beside him, dreaming of another man. The woman he'd built his life around, the mother of his children, was now a stranger. The burner phone, now hidden in his fishing tackle box, contained not just texts, but photos, intimate photos, evidence of illicit rendezvous in hotels while Colin believed Natalie was at client meetings for her boutique marketing job, and plans. Plans for their new life, funded by money siphoned from their joint accounts. Morning brought a forced normalcy. Colin suggested taking the kids fishing at dawn as planned, but Natalie suddenly insisted on joining them, something she'd never done before. "Since when do you fish?" Colin asked, raising an eyebrow as he prepared the gear. "It's our anniversary weekend," she replied with a smile that failed to reach her eyes. "I want to try new things." Colin recognized the tactic. She was buying time, preventing him from being alone with the kids. As they walked to the lake, Sophie stayed close to her father. Alex trudged ahead, still sullen, but at least away from his devices. Colin noted Natalie checking her watch again. "Expecting someone?" he asked casually. Her head snapped up. "What?" "No, just checking how much daylight we have." The fishing expedition was cut short when Natalie claimed a headache. Back at the cabin, Colin watched as she took 2 aspirin, then retreated upstairs to rest, but not before checking her hidden pocket where the burner phone should have been. Her momentary panic, a flicker of raw fear, was visible only to Colin, who was watching for it. "Kids, why don't you explore the trails a bit?" Colin suggested once Natalie was upstairs. "Stay within shouting distance." When they were gone, he made another call, keeping his voice low. "Diana, it's Colin Mercer. I need that information now." "Yes, all of it." Diana Frost, the private investigator Colin had hired after Sophie's revelation at the gas station, confirmed what the burner phone had suggested. The affair had been ongoing for 2 years. Ryan had been systematically embezzling from his financial consulting firm to fund their planned escape. Most devastatingly, the discovery that Alex knew, not everything, but enough. Natalie had been priming him, whispering insidious lies that Colin was controlling, that they deserved better. When the kids returned from their hike, Colin pulled Alex aside. "Son, we need to talk." Alex's defiance was immediate. "About what?" "About why you've been so angry with me. About what Mom has told you." The boy's face paled. "She didn't tell me anything." "Alex," Colin said firmly, his voice holding an unyielding authority. "I know about Ryan. I know Mom's been talking to you about leaving." Tears welled in the boy's eyes. "She said you'd try to keep us, that you'd take everything from her." Colin fought to control his anger, his voice a low rumble. "Has your mother ever known me to be unfair, to be cruel?" Alex looked away, shaking his head. "No. I built this family with everything I have. I would never abandon you or your sister." Colin placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "But I need the truth, all of it." Slowly, haltingly, Alex revealed what he knew. Natalie had told him they would be starting fresh with Ryan, who would be a better match for their family. She'd promised Alex a new school where he could reinvent himself, free from his reputation as the contractor's son. "Did she say when this was happening?" Colin asked. "After this trip," Alex admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "She said we should enjoy one last weekend as a family, for memories." The sheer, calculated cruelty of it all hardened Colin's resolve. His wife and her lover had plotted not just to destroy his marriage, but to steal his children and bankrupt him in the process. As evening approached, Colin noticed Natalie growing increasingly anxious, her gaze fixed on the long, winding driveway. She'd changed into a new outfit, applied makeup, and opened a bottle of wine, meticulously setting the stage for their grand pronouncement. "Kids, time for a movie in the loft," Colin announced, giving them a significant look. "Big screen, popcorn, the works." Once they were safely upstairs, Colin poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat opposite his wife at the kitchen table. 15 years, he said quietly, his voice a lethal whisper. 15 years, Natalie. She sat down, her wine glass clutched in her hand. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know. Colin's voice was controlled, chilling in its restraint. I know about Ryan. I know about Phoenix. I know about the money you've been moving from our accounts. Natalie's face cycled through shock, then frantic denial, and finally a cold, calculating resolve. How long have you known? Long enough. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted them, headlights sweeping across the cabin windows as a vehicle approached. Perfect timing, Colin said, taking another sip of whiskey. Right on schedule. Natalie stood abruptly. Colin, let me explain. Save it for the attorneys, he cut her off, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But first, let's welcome our guest, shall we? The headlights of Ryan's Range Rover cut through the darkness, illuminating the cabin windows as it pulled up outside. Natalie's eyes darted between Colin and the door, panic blooming in her expression. Colin, please, she began, her voice a desperate plea. Please what? His voice remained unnervingly calm, a terrifying quietude. Please don't make a scene. Please let you destroy our family quietly. A knock at the door, 3 confident, impatient raps. Colin stood, straightening his shoulders. Should I get that, or would you prefer to welcome your lover yourself? The color drained from Natalie's face. The kids are upstairs, watching a movie with headphones on. All part of the plan, right? Colin moved toward the door, his steps measured, deliberate. Your plan was to have this conversation with me. Well, now we'll have it. He opened the door to reveal Ryan Patterson, tall, tanned, dressed in expensive casual wear that screamed aspirational wealth more than the actual success. For a fleeting moment, Ryan's practiced smile faltered as he registered Colin's presence instead of Natalie's. Colin, he recovered quickly, a forced cordiality in his voice. I thought you'd be out with the kids. Change of plans. Colin stepped aside, a sardonic twist to his lips. Come in. We were just talking about you. Ryan entered with the swagger of a man who believed he held all the cards, the same misplaced confidence Colin had seen in countless opponents who didn't realize they'd already lost. Natalie, Ryan acknowledged with a nod, maintaining a flimsy facade of casualness, thought we agreed on timing. She didn't have much choice, Colin interrupted, his voice a low growl. Hard to coordinate when your burner phone goes missing. Ryan's eyes widened fractionally before his expression smoothed over, a practiced mask. I don't know what you're talking about. Colin pulled the burner phone from his pocket, tossing it onto the coffee table with a soft thud. 2 years of messages say otherwise, rather explicit ones at that. The 3 adults stood in a tense triangle, the comfortable cabin suddenly feeling like a suffocating cage. Colin, Natalie found her voice, switching tactics from denial to a plea for reasonableness. We didn't want it to happen this way. We were going to tell you tomorrow, properly, with dignity. Dignity, Colin laughed, a sound devoid of humor, a harsh grating sound. Is that what you call planning to take my children across state lines? Draining our accounts? Turning my son against me? Ryan took a step forward, hands raised placatingly. Look, we should all calm down. We're adults here. These things happen. These things? Colin's voice dropped dangerously low, a menacing whisper. You mean screwing your wife's sister? Betraying your brother-in-law? Those things? Ryan's jaw tightened. Natalie and I didn't choose this. It just happened. For 2 years, Colin's voice rose, a controlled fury simmering beneath the surface. With hotel receipts, secret phones, and an apartment lease in Phoenix? That's not just happening. That's calculated betrayal. A creak on the stairs interrupted them. Sophie stood halfway down, her small face solemn, her brown eyes taking in the scene. Dad, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Princess, Colin assured her, his voice softening. Uncle Ryan just stopped by to talk about grown-up things. Head back upstairs, okay? Sophie's eyes moved from her father to her mother to Ryan, understanding far more than a child her age should. I told Dad about the phone, she said to Natalie, her voice small but firm. I'm not sorry. Natalie blanched. Sophie, upstairs, now! Sophie, Colin interjected gently, a subtle warning in his tone. I've got this. After Sophie reluctantly retreated, Colin turned back to the adulterers. Here's what's going to happen. Ryan, you're going to leave now. Natalie, you can go with him if you want, but the kids stay with me tonight. You can't decide that, Natalie protested, her voice rising in a desperate crescendo. They're my children, too. Should have thought about that before planning to kidnap them to Arizona, Colin replied evenly. Don't worry, we'll sort out custody arrangements through proper channels. Unless you'd prefer I call the police about the financial improprieties I've discovered? Ryan tensed, his eyes narrowing. What financial improprieties? The ones Diana Frost documented, Colin said, referring to the private investigator. Transfers from Brookfield Investments client accounts to your personal offshore account. Did you think I wouldn't check thoroughly once I knew about the affair? Ryan paled. You're bluffing. Colin pulled out his phone, displaying a series of transaction records. $300,000 over 18 months. Creative accounting, but not creative enough. The revelation left Ryan speechless. Natalie looked between the two men, her carefully constructed future crumbling around her. You set us up, she accused Colin, her voice laced with bitterness. This whole cabin trip was your idea. I just played along once Sophie showed me what was really happening, Colin reminded her, his voice flat. Ryan recovered, anger replacing shock. You can't prove anything without exposing your own investigation methods. Private investigators accessing financial records? That's not exactly legal either. Colin smiled thinly, a chilling, humorless curve of his lips. I don't need to prove anything in court, yet. Right now, I just need you both to understand the situation. You're not holding any cards here. He pulled out another document from his jacket pocket. This is a record of every dollar removed from our joint accounts over the past year. Funds that were contractually designated for our children's education and our business operations. Natalie's breathing quickened. I had every right to steal from your children? Colin finished, his voice cutting through hers. A judge might disagree, especially when they see the texts discussing how to hide assets during the divorce you were planning. The cabin fell silent, save for the distant murmur of the movie playing upstairs. Colin let the moment stretch, watching Ryan and Natalie exchange panicked glances. What do you want? Ryan finally asked, his voice tight, defeat etched into every syllable. Tonight I want you gone, Colin stated flatly. Tomorrow my attorney will contact you both with terms. Terms? Natalie echoed, her voice barely a whisper. For how this ends, Colin clarified, his voice unwavering. Because it is ending, make no mistake. Ryan grabbed his car keys. Natalie, get your things, we're leaving. The kids, she began, her eyes darting to Colin. Stay with me, Colin said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. Unless you want the authorities questioning why you're fleeing across state lines with minors after withdrawing large sums of money. Ryan headed for the door, his earlier confidence shattered, his swagger replaced by a desperate urgency. Natalie, now! She hesitated, looking up toward where her children were. For a moment, Colin saw a flicker of maternal concern, quickly overshadowed by raw self-preservation. I'll call you tomorrow, she told Colin, grabbing her purse. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Colin replied, his voice calm, resolute. It ended the moment you involved my children in your betrayal. After they left, the cabin felt eerily quiet, the air thick with the residue of shattered illusions. Colin poured another whiskey and called upstairs. Kids, you can come down now. Sophie appeared first, her small face etched with worry, followed by Alex, whose red-rimmed eyes revealed he'd been crying. "Where's Mom?" Alex asked, his voice small, fragile. "She left with Uncle Ryan," Colin answered honestly. She needed some time to think. Sophie climbed onto her father's lap, something she hadn't done in years, her small body a comforting weight against his. "Are we staying at the cabin?" Colin nodded. "For tonight. Tomorrow we'll head home and figure things out." "Is Mom coming back?" Alex pressed, confusion and hurt evident in his expression. Colin looked his son in the eyes, his voice laced with unwavering love. "I don't know, buddy. But no matter what happens between me and your mother, nothing changes how much I love you both." That night, with his children finally asleep, Colin sat on the cabin porch staring at the vast, indifferent expanse of stars. He'd won the first round, a brutal, emotionally draining victory, but he harbored no illusions about the battles yet to come. Natalie, he knew, would not surrender without a fight, and Ryan had too much at stake to back down easily. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana Frost. "Additional information secured. Moving to phase 2 per your instructions." Colin texted back a single word: "Proceed." The real work was just beginning. The drive back to Denver the following day was heavy with unspoken questions. Alex sat silently in the back seat, headphones on but no music playing, a shield against conversation. Sophie alternated between watching the mountains pass and studying her father's profile, gauging his composure. Colin maintained a steady presence for his children, but his mind raced through the intricate plan he'd set in motion. Diana Frost had been thorough, uncovering layers of deception that went beyond the affair. The financial trail she'd followed revealed something far more calculated than a simple infidelity. Back at home, Colin found evidence that Natalie had already removed personal items, clothes, jewelry, mementos. She'd been preparing for this split longer than he'd realized. What surprised him was finding the master bedroom closet still containing the custom suit he'd had made for their anniversary, the one she'd insisted he order. Next to it hung a bag containing the dress she'd asked him to buy her as a gift, props for a performance that would never happen. Colin called his longtime friend Leo Daniels, arranging for the children to spend the afternoon with Leo's family while he attended to urgent business. Leo, a former Marine who'd served with Colin before they both entered civilian life, understood immediately the gravity of the situation. "How bad?" Leo asked when he arrived to pick up the kids. "Worse than I thought," Colin replied quietly, making sure Alex and Sophie were out of earshot. "I need a few hours to set things in motion." Leo clasped his shoulder firmly. "Whatever you need." "Angela will keep the kids distracted with that new pool." Once alone, Colin contacted his attorney, Benjamin Wells, who arrived within the hour carrying a thick folder of documents. Ben was not just Colin's lawyer, but a strategic partner in several business ventures, a man who understood that legal battles were won before they ever reached a courtroom. "Diana sent everything over this morning," Ben said, spreading papers across the dining room table. "It's a mess, Colin, but it gives us leverage." The documents revealed that Ryan had been systematically embezzling from his investment clients for nearly 3 years, longer than the affair had been ongoing. More disturbing was evidence that Natalie had been actively helping him launder money through shell companies registered under variations of her maiden name. "The money they took from your joint accounts was just the surface," Ben explained, showing Colin transaction records. "They were using your business reputation as cover for something bigger." Colin examined the paperwork, his expression hardening. "They were planning to frame me if things went south." Ben nodded grimly. "These duplicate contracts with your company letterhead but subtle differences in the terms, classic setup for fraud allegations. If their plan had worked, you'd be fighting criminal charges while they disappeared with the assets and the kids." The discovery that his wife had not only betrayed their marriage but had actively participated in setting him up for financial ruin and potential imprisonment ignited something cold and methodical in Colin's mind. "Options?" he asked simply. Ben outlined several approaches, from immediate legal action to more strategic countermoves. "The problem is, going public means exposing everything, including their allegations against you, fabricated as they are. The investigation alone could damage your business reputation, and the kids would be caught in the crossfire, Colin added, thinking of how Alex was already struggling. They were interrupted by the doorbell. When Colin answered, he found Vanessa Patterson on his doorstep, her expression a mixture of fury and anguish. "Where is he?" she demanded, pushing past Colin into the foyer. "Where's my husband?" Colin led her to the living room, offering her a seat. She refused to take it. "I assume you figured it out? Figured out that my sister and my husband have been—" Vanessa couldn't finish the sentence. "Ryan didn't come home last night. Natalie's not answering my calls. Then I found records of an apartment lease in Phoenix with both their names." "When did you discover this?" Colin asked, studying her closely. "This morning," Vanessa replied, her voice breaking. "I came straight here. I thought maybe it was a mistake, that there was some explanation." "There isn't," Colin interrupted gently. "It's been going on for 2 years, Vanessa. I only confirmed it myself yesterday." Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa, her composure crumbling. 2 years? How could I not have seen it?" "We see what we expect to see," Colin said, pouring her a glass of water. "The question is, what do you plan to do now?" Her eyes met his, sudden understanding dawning. "You're not just letting them get away with this." "No," Colin confirmed. "I'm not." The conversation with Vanessa revealed additional pieces of the puzzle. She'd noticed financial discrepancies in their accounts months ago, but Ryan had dismissed her concerns with plausible explanations. She'd also found hotel receipts that Ryan claimed were business trips, the same hotels documented in the texts between him and Natalie. "I feel like such a fool," Vanessa whispered. "All those times, they were together while we were watching the kids or working." Colin recognized the same pain he felt, the humiliation of having been deceived by the people closest to them. What they did reflects on them, not us. After Vanessa left, promising to consider Colin's proposal for a united front, he made another call, this time to Fletcher Boyd, his most trusted project manager. "Fletch, I need you to take over operations for a few weeks," Colin instructed. "Family emergency." "Everything okay, boss?" Fletcher asked, concern evident in his voice. "It will be," Colin replied. "But I need to focus on my kids right now." With the business temporarily handled, Colin retrieved the children from Leo's house. Sophie ran to him immediately, wrapping her arms around his waist. Alex hung back, uncertainty written across his features. "Has Mom called?" he asked hopefully. "Not yet, buddy," Colin answered honestly. "But we need to talk about what happens next." That evening, Colin sat both children down and explained as gently as possible that their mother had made choices that meant their family would look different moving forward. He was careful not to demonize Natalie, despite his own feelings, knowing the children needed to process the situation without additional burdens. "Are we poor now?" Sophie asked suddenly. The question caught Colin off guard. "No, Princess. Why would you think that?" "I heard Mom telling Uncle Ryan that you'd have nothing left," Sophie explained, her perceptiveness once again revealing how much she'd observed. "She said you'd lose everything." The innocent revelation of such callous planning strengthened Colin's resolve. His children had been witnessing more than anyone realized, carrying knowledge no child should bear. "We're going to be fine," Colin assured them both. "I promise you that." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Colin received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet tomorrow. Neutral location." It was from Natalie. Colin didn't respond immediately, instead reviewing the comprehensive strategy he and Ben had developed. The next move was critical, not just for his retribution but for protecting his children from the fallout. He finally replied with a time and location, a coffee shop in a busy shopping center where their conversation would need to remain civil. Then he called Diana Frost again. "I need surveillance on a meeting," he instructed, "and I need to know who else Natalie contacts between now and then." Diana's response was professional and immediate. "Already on it. Regarding the financial records you asked about, we found the connection, sending details now." The information that appeared in Colin's email minutes later confirmed his suspicions. The betrayal went beyond the personal. It was a calculated destruction of everything he'd built, orchestrated by the woman who had once vowed to stand beside him. Colin closed his laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where he'd built his home and raised his family. The neighbors had no idea of the war being waged behind closed doors, the strategic moves and countermoves that would determine not just his future but his children's as well. Tomorrow would be the first public battle in what promised to be a long campaign, but Colin had something Natalie and Ryan didn't: absolute clarity about what he was fighting for and what he was willing to sacrifice to win. As he turned from the window, his phone chimed with a message from Ben. "Documents filed. Clock starts tomorrow." Colin allowed himself a grim smile. Natalie thought she was arranging a negotiation. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush of her own making. The Denver Coffee Collective buzzed with morning activity when Colin arrived 15 minutes early for his meeting with Natalie. He chose a table in the corner, visible enough to discourage a scene but private enough for conversation. Diana Frost sat 3 tables away, appearing absorbed in her laptop but strategically positioned to observe and record if necessary. Colin spotted Natalie the moment she entered. She dressed carefully in a conservative blue dress that projected an image of the wronged party rather than the betrayer. Her eyes scanned the coffee shop, momentarily widening when she noticed Diana before focusing on Colin. "Who's your friend?" Natalie asked as she sat down, nodding toward Diana. "Insurance," Colin replied simply. "You didn't come alone either." He gestured subtly toward the window where Ryan sat in his Range Rover across the street, pretending to be on a phone call but watching the coffee shop intently. "Ryan is concerned for my safety," Natalie said defensively, "after how you behaved at the cabin." "Let's skip the performance," Colin interrupted. "We both know why we're here." Natalie's carefully composed expression faltered before she regained control. "The children need stability. This hostile approach isn't helping anyone." "Interesting coming from the woman who planned to disappear with them to Arizona," Colin noted. "But you're right about one thing. They do need stability. That's non-negotiable." Natalie leaned forward. "I'm their mother." "Colin, courts favor mothers, usually." Colin acknowledged. "But courts also take a dim view of parents involved in financial fraud who attempt to flee state lines with children during divorce proceedings." The color drained from Natalie's face. "You're bluffing." Colin slid a manila envelope across the table. "These were filed with the court this morning. Emergency custody petition based on flight risk and criminal investigation." Natalie opened the envelope with trembling fingers, scanning the documents inside. Her expression shifted from confidence to shock to calculation as she processed the legal maneuver. "This won't stand," she said finally. "We have explanations for everything. Character witnesses. You're just trying to intimidate me." "Am I?" Colin asked mildly. "Perhaps this might interest you. The judge granted the temporary order. I have sole physical custody until the hearing next week. You can have supervised visitation until then." Natalie's composure cracked. "You can't do this. The children need me." "They needed you when you were planning to uproot them from their school, friends, and family for your affair," Colin countered. "They needed you when you were willing to destroy their father to cover your tracks." "It wasn't like that," Natalie protested, lowering her voice as nearby patrons glanced their way. "Ryan and we fell in love. These things happen." "Love doesn't involve embezzlement and fraud," Colin replied evenly. "Or setting up your children's father to take the fall for your crimes." Natalie's eyes darted around the coffee shop, calculating her options. "What do you want, Colin? Money? The house? Name your price." The suggestion that everything, their marriage, their family, his relationship with his children, could be reduced to a transaction confirmed everything Colin needed to know about the woman he'd married. "I want my children protected," he stated. "I want what's rightfully theirs secured, and I want you and Ryan to face the consequences of your actions." Natalie's expression hardened. "Ryan has connections, powerful ones. You're a contractor with some local success, Colin. Don't overestimate your position." "Interesting you should mention his connections," Colin replied. sliding another document across the table. Like Senator Weber, whose campaign funds were among those Ryan misappropriated, or Douglas Hamilton at First Federal, who's already cooperating with investigators to save himself. The names visibly shook Natalie. How did you— Diana is very thorough, Colin explained, nodding toward the PI. And people like Ryan always leave trails when they think they're too clever to be caught. Natalie glanced toward the window where Ryan was now standing beside his vehicle, watching intently. Her hand moved toward her purse. Before you text him to come rescue you, Colin said, you should know that Ben Wells is meeting with the district attorney right now. The only question is whether you're going down with Ryan or cutting a deal. A deal, Natalie repeated, her attention suddenly focused. Colin laid out his terms. Natalie would relinquish primary custody, agree to supervise visitation until a psychological evaluation deemed it appropriate for more, surrender all claims to his business assets, and cooperate with authorities regarding Ryan's financial crimes. In exchange, Colin concluded, I won't pursue charges against you directly, provided the money taken from our accounts is returned, the children's college funds specifically. Natalie stared at him, measuring his resolve. And if I refuse? Then the DA gets everything, Colin said, including evidence of your active participation in the scheme, the text messages where you suggested using my business as cover, the forged documents with my signature that you notarized yourself. For the first time, genuine fear showed in Natalie's eyes. You'd send me to prison? The mother of your children? You were willing to send me there, Colin reminded her. The difference is I'm offering you a way out, for the kids' sake, not yours. The coffee shop had grown quieter, as if the other patrons sensed the gravity of the conversation happening in the corner. Natalie's phone buzzed with a text from Ryan visible on the screen. Everything okay? It's your choice, Colin said, standing to leave. Ben will contact your attorney with a formal offer. You have 24 hours before we proceed with the criminal complaint. As Colin walked past Diana's table, he gave a subtle nod. She would monitor Natalie, tracking her next moves. Outside, Colin deliberately walked past Ryan's Range Rover, making eye contact with the man who had helped destroy his marriage. Ryan rolled down his window. This isn't over, Mercer. Actually, for you it is, Colin replied calmly. The only question is how hard you fall. Back at home, Colin found Leo supervising the children in the backyard. Alex was showing surprising patience, teaching Sophie how to shoot baskets, his earlier sullenness temporarily replaced by brotherly affection. How'd it go? Leo asked as Colin joined him on the patio. Phase 1 complete, Colin answered. Now we wait. The waiting didn't last long. By evening, Colin had received calls from 2 attorneys, Natalie's hastily retained divorce lawyer attempting to negotiate better terms, and Ryan's criminal defense attorney seeking information about what evidence might exist. Colin directed both to Ben Wells, maintaining the disciplined approach that had served him throughout his career. When emotional decisions were required, he made them with his children's long-term welfare as the only consideration. 3 days later, the hammer fell. Federal agents arrested Ryan Patterson at his office, charging him with wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The news spread quickly through Denver's business community, including to Alex, who learned about it from a classmate's text before Colin could explain. The confrontation that followed tested Colin's resolve to protect his children from the uglier aspects of the situation. You got Uncle Ryan arrested, Alex accused, storming into Colin's home office. Mom called. She said you're trying to destroy them because you're jealous. Colin set aside the contracts he'd been reviewing. Sit down, Alex. No, you're ruining everything, the boy shouted, tears welling in his eyes. Mom says once you calm down, we can all be adults about this. She says you're being vindictive. Alex, Colin said firmly, sit down. Something in his father's tone penetrated Alex's anger. He dropped into the chair opposite the desk, his teenage defiance warring with the respect Colin had always commanded. Uncle Ryan was arrested because he stole money from his clients, Colin explained calmly, including your college fund. That has nothing to do with his relationship with your mother. Mom says you're making it all up, Alex countered, though with less conviction. Colin unlocked his desk drawer and removed a file, sliding it across to his son. These are bank statements showing transfers from your education account to an offshore account in the Caymans. This is your mother's signature authorizing those transfers. Alex stared at the documents, disbelief giving way to confusion. But why would she? Because she and Ryan needed money to start their new life, Colin said gently, and they didn't plan on taking financial responsibility for you or your sister once they left. The boy's face crumpled as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She told me we were all going to Phoenix, that you were trying to stop us because you were controlling. Colin moved around the desk, kneeling beside his son's chair. I would never stop you from seeing your mother, Alex, but I will stop anyone, including her, from hurting you or Sophie. For the first time since the ordeal began, Alex broke down completely, allowing his father to pull him into an embrace. The walls of teenage independence crumbled as he sobbed against Colin's shoulder. I thought it was your fault, he choked out. By dawn's first cruel light, Colin held the keys to Natalie's undoing. Her fresh email trails, her clandestine text messages, the cold hard facts of her financial deceit, all laid bare. But most damning of all, the meticulously forged evidence she intended to wield against him. These documents, clumsy alterations of legitimate contracts from Colin's own company, were designed to ensnare him in Ryan's insidious schemes. What Natalie, in her reckless ambition, failed to grasp was the immutable truth. The original untainted agreements lay secured within blockchain-verified digital vaults, their authenticity and timestamps etched into an unchangeable ledger. Her pathetic forgeries would only serve as chains to bind her, should she dare to present them. Yet Colin harbored no intention of waiting for that catastrophic moment. The deluge of intelligence he now possessed provided the final vital pieces to his intricate strategy. Among them, the crucial detail of Natalie's imminent rendezvous with Gerald Hoffman, where she planned to peddle her fabricated truths in exchange for the financial lifeline she so desperately craved. At precisely 7:30 a.m., Colin's call pierced the morning quiet. Leo, it's time for the final phase. Are your people ready, on standby? Leo's voice, calm and resolute, confirmed. Diana sent over the intel package this morning. Clean operation, just as we planned. Good, Colin replied, his voice a low hum of anticipation. Execution begins tomorrow at 4 p.m. I'll handle Hoffman personally. A brief pause hung in the air before Leo's hesitant query. Are you sure about this, Colin? Once we cross this line... They crossed it first, Colin interrupted, his voice edged with a chilling finality. When they tried to steal my children's future, when they plotted to frame me for their crimes, when they betrayed everything I built. Understood, Leo acknowledged, the unspoken weight of Colin's resolve settling between them. We'll be ready. That very afternoon, Colin donned the mantle of devoted father. He cheered with fervor at Alex's basketball game, beamed with pride at Sophie's dance recital, and hosted a small, joyous birthday celebration for her, surrounded by her school friends. To any casual observer, he was simply a man piecing his shattered family back together after a devastating betrayal. Not a meticulous architect, poised to spring a trap that would irrevocably seal the fates of those who had wronged him. As he tucked Sophie into bed that night, a question, fragile and raw, finally slipped past her lips. Dad, is Mom ever coming back home? Colin smoothed her hair gently. No, Princess. Mom has made different choices for her life now. Sophie pondered this, a somberness beyond her tender years settling on her face. Is it because she loves Uncle Ryan more than us? The innocent query ripped through Colin's carefully constructed composure, exposing the festering wound beneath. Your mom loves you, Sophie, he began, his voice strained. She just made mistakes that can't be undone. Like when I broke your special picture frame and tried to hide it, she offered, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Colin smiled, a melancholic curve of his lips. Bigger mistakes than that, adult mistakes. Sophie nodded, as if this explanation, however vague, offered a measure of solace. I'm glad you're not going anywhere, Daddy. Never, Colin promised, kissing her forehead. Not ever. Once both children were lost to the depths of slumber, Colin retreated to his home office. The surveillance feeds from Natalie's condo painted a stark picture. She paced, a restless phantom, her voice a hushed anxiety on the phone. The directional microphones, covertly installed the night before, delivered her words with chilling clarity. Tomorrow at 4, Gerald. Yes, I have everything prepared. No, Colin has no idea. The documents prove he knew everything Ryan was doing. Yes, enough leverage to force a renegotiation of the settlement. A cold smile, thin and predatory, ghosted across Colin's face as he activated the final protocol on his secure laptop. A countdown timer flared to life. 18 hours and 24 minutes, and counting down to tomorrow afternoon. The spider had meticulously spun his web. Now it was time for the flies to become irrevocably entangled. Judgment Day. The Atherton Hotel's lobby whispered of bygone opulence, gleaming marble floors, rich mahogany paneling, and discreet staff who possessed an innate ability to discern wealth and power without a single word. At 3:45 p.m., Colin occupied one of the high-backed leather chairs, a perfect vantage point from which to survey both the main entrance and the elevators ascending to the private meeting rooms above. He was clad in a precisely tailored charcoal suit, an ensemble that projected the image of a formidable businessman rather than a mere construction contractor, a persona he rarely adopted but could effortlessly embody when the moment demanded. A Wall Street Journal lay untouched beside him, his gaze fixed instead on the hotel's revolving door. Precisely at 3:52 p.m., Natalie materialized. She had dressed with meticulous care for this pivotal encounter, a conservative navy dress, understated jewelry, her hair styled to convey competence rather than her usual calculated glamour. The portfolio clutched in her perfectly manicured hands held what she truly believed was her salvation, the forged documents designed to condemn Colin in Ryan's machinations. Colin watched, a silent predator, as she approached the reception desk, confirming her meeting with Gerald Hoffman in Executive Suite 3. The receptionist, with a practiced smile, directed her to the elevators. Natalie, too consumed by the silent rehearsal of her impending pitch, passed within mere feet of Colin, utterly oblivious to his presence. As she vanished into the elevator's gleaming maw, Colin checked his phone. A secure messaging app displayed an update from Leo. All assets in position. Hoffman arrived through service entrance 10 minutes ago. Colin's reply was succinct, proceeding as planned. At 4:10 p.m., Colin ascended to the third floor. He offered a subtle nod to the plainclothed security officer stationed near the emergency exit, another of Leo's discreet operatives, ensuring the unfolding drama remained uninterrupted. The hallway was deserted, save for a maintenance cart strategically positioned outside Executive Suite 3, seemingly abandoned, but in truth a covert vessel for the surveillance equipment monitoring the meeting within. Colin approached the suite, withdrawing an electronic key card provided by the hotel's head of security, a former client who owed Colin a considerable debt. He paused, listening to the voices within through an earpiece connected to the surveillance system. These documents clearly show Colin Mercer's signature authorizing transactions related to the diverted funds. Natalie's voice, now brimming with a deceptive confidence, echoed in his ear. He was fully aware of Ryan's activities, but turned on him when he discovered our relationship. Gerald Hoffman's response was measured, tinged with a healthy skepticism. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Mercer. If authentic, they contradict the narrative that's been established in the media and with prosecutors. That's why they're valuable, Natalie pressed, her voice a desperate plea for validation. Colin has cultivated this image of the wronged husband, the dedicated father, victimized by his wife and brother-in-law. These prove otherwise. And what exactly do you want from me in exchange for this information? Hoffman asked, cutting to the chase. Financial backing to restart my life, Natalie replied without hesitation. And your connections to force a renegotiation of my divorce settlement. The trap was fully sprung. Colin swiped the keycard, entering the suite without a single knock. Natalie's face crumpled, her initial shock swiftly giving way to raw fear as Colin walked calmly into the room. Hoffman, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the weathered features of someone accustomed to wielding power, displayed only mild surprise. "I believe I'm right on time," Colin said pleasantly, as if he were an invited guest. "Colin?" Natalie gasped, instinctively clutching the forged documents spread across the table. "How did you—" "Mr. Hoffman and I have mutual interests," Colin interrupted, extending his hand to the older man. "Thank you for arranging this meeting." Hoffman rose, shaking Colin's hand firmly. "Mr. Mercer, your reputation precedes you." Natalie's gaze darted between the two men, comprehension dawning with agonizing slowness. "You know each other?" "Not personally until today," Colin clarified, taking a seat at the table. "But Mr. Hoffman contacted my attorney yesterday after you approached him with your proposition." The color drained from Natalie's face. "Gerald, whatever he's told you, please—" Hoffman raised a hand, silencing her. "I've known Thomas Patterson, Ryan's father, for 30 years. When his daughter-in-law approached me claiming to have evidence contradicting everything the authorities have established, I did my due diligence." "This is a setup," Natalie accused, standing abruptly. "I'm leaving." "I wouldn't," Colin advised calmly. "Not unless you want to explain those forged documents to the FBI agents currently waiting in the lobby." As if on cue, Colin's phone displayed a text from Diana. "Federal agents on standby. Evidence package delivered." Natalie sank back into her chair, the crushing reality of her situation finally taking hold. "You planned this." "I planned for everything," Colin corrected, his voice a chilling monotone, "including your attempts to frame me after your own immunity deal was secured." Hoffman leaned forward. "Mrs. Mercer, I agreed to this meeting not to help you, but to understand the full extent of the situation affecting a family I've known for decades. What I've witnessed today confirms everything Mr. Mercer told me." "Which is?" Natalie challenged, her voice thin with desperation. "That you're willing to destroy anyone, including the father of your children, to save yourself," Hoffman stated flatly. "The documents you presented are obvious forgeries. Coming here today wasn't just foolish. It constitutes attempted fraud and violates your immunity agreement." Colin placed his own folder on the table. "These are the original blockchain-verified contracts with immutable timestamps. Alongside them are records of your activities since Ryan's arrest, including your meetings with his former associates and your explicit statements about fabricating evidence against me." Natalie's facade finally crumbled completely. "What do you want from me, Colin? Haven't you taken enough?" "I've taken nothing that wasn't rightfully mine, or our children's," Colin replied, his voice devoid of all emotion. "But you're right. This meeting isn't about taking more. It's about ensuring you understand your position going forward." He slid a document across the table, a modified custody agreement with terms even more restrictive than the original. "You'll sign this now, relinquishing all visitation rights until a court-appointed psychiatrist certifies you're no longer a detrimental influence on our children. You'll also sign a sworn affidavit confirming that the documents you presented today are forgeries created by you alone." "And if I refuse?" Natalie asked, though her voice lacked any conviction. "Then Mr. Hoffman will testify about this meeting. The federal agents downstairs will receive the evidence of your attempted fraud, and your immunity deal will be voided," Colin stated matter-of-factly. "You'll join Ryan in federal custody by nightfall." Hoffman stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "I've seen enough, Mr. Mercer. I'll leave you to conclude your business. My statement has been recorded as agreed." He nodded toward a small device on the table, cleverly disguised as a penholder. After Hoffman departed, Colin and Natalie sat in silence for several moments. The once beautiful woman who had shared his bed for 15 years now looked hollow, her careful makeup unable to conceal the deepening lines of stress and fear. "You've thought of everything," she finally said, reaching for the documents with trembling hands. "Not everything," Colin replied. "I never thought you'd try to take my children from me. I never thought you'd attempt to destroy everything I built. Those were your innovations." As Natalie signed the papers, tears finally broke through her composed facade. She asked the question that had clearly haunted her. "Did you ever love me, Colin? Really love me?" Colin considered the question carefully. I loved who I thought you were. That person never existed. Once the documents were signed, Colin gathered them into his briefcase. The agents downstairs have been instructed to escort you home. Your belongings will be delivered to your sister's house in Breckenridge tomorrow. You're not to return to Denver without written permission from the court. Vanessa won't take me in, Natalie protested, her voice rising in a desperate plea. Not after everything. She's your sister, Colin replied dispassionately. And unlike you, she understands family loyalty. The arrangement is already made. As Colin prepared to leave, Natalie made one final, desperate attempt. The children will ask for me. Sophie will cry for her mother. Colin paused at the door, allowing himself one fleeting moment of genuine emotion. Yes, they will. And that pain, their pain that you caused, is something I can never forgive, not if I lived 1,000 years. The hotel corridor was empty as Colin walked toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Inside, he allowed himself 10 seconds to close his eyes, exhaling slowly, releasing the coiled tension of the confrontation. When the doors opened to the lobby, he was composed once more. Diana Frost waited near the hotel entrance, feigning absorption in documents on a tablet. As Colin approached, she fell into step beside him without acknowledging him directly. Ryan received the evidence package at the detention center an hour ago, she murmured. His attorney has already contacted the prosecutors about a potential deal. Too late, Colin replied, his voice barely audible as they crossed the lobby. The senator withdrew his support this morning. No deals outside. Leo waited with the car, opening the door as Colin approached. Once all three were inside and moving through downtown traffic, Leo asked the question that hung in the air. Is it done? Colin nodded, loosening his tie. It's done. She's finished. And the children? Diana inquired. They'll never have to see her again unless they choose to when they're older, Colin answered. The psychiatric evaluation requirement ensures that no judge will override it, given the evidence we've assembled. The car glided through the city toward Colin's home where Mrs. Henderson, an older widow from the neighborhood who had become the children's after-school caretaker, would be preparing dinner with Sophie's help and overseeing Alex's homework. As Denver's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, Colin reflected on the tumultuous events of the past month. The shattering discovery, the bitter betrayal, the cold, calculated response. He had meticulously dismantled the conspiracy against him, turning his enemies' weapons back upon themselves. Some might view his actions as excessive, even cruel, but those people hadn't witnessed Sophie's tears when she realized her mother had been willing to abandon her. They hadn't seen Alex's confusion and pain upon discovering the web of lies. They hadn't felt the raw, unyielding determination that came from knowing your children's future had been so callously bartered away by the very people who should have protected them most. Any regrets? Leo asked quietly as they turned into Colin's neighborhood. Colin watched as his home came into view, lights glowing warmly in the windows, Sophie's bicycle propped against the garage door, the basketball hoop where he and Alex had recently begun reconnecting during evening games. Not a single one, he answered with absolute certainty. The spider had sprung his trap. The web had held. Justice, cold, implacable justice, had been served. Aftermath, Judgment Day's echoes. 6 months later, the Denver morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight glinting off a fresh blanket of snow. Colin stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Sophie and Alex meticulously sculpt a snowman in the backyard. Their laughter drifted through the glass, a sound that had become increasingly common as the raw wounds of betrayal slowly, imperceptibly healed. The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of Ben Wells for their quarterly review. Colin greeted his attorney with a firm handshake, leading him to the home office where financial statements and legal documents lay meticulously arranged on the desk. The business is thriving, Ben observed, reviewing the quarterly reports. 3 new major contracts since New Year's. The scandal hasn't affected your reputation, after all. If anything, it enhanced it. Clients appreciate knowing who they're dealing with. Colin replied, taking his seat behind the desk. Someone who won't tolerate dishonesty at any level. Ben nodded, shifting to more personal matters. Ryan's sentencing is next week. Prosecutors are pushing for the maximum 25 years, given the scope of the fraud and the number of victims. Good, Colin said simply. And Natalie, Ben confirmed, still in Breckenridge with Vanessa. He slid a folder across the desk. The court-appointed psychiatrist submitted his third evaluation yesterday. He continues to recommend against resuming visitation, cites her persistent attempts to shift blame and inability to acknowledge the damage her actions caused to the children. Colin reviewed the report without visible emotion, though internally he felt a grim satisfaction. The intricate system he had so carefully manipulated continued to deliver precisely the outcome he had designed. She's requested another hearing, Ben continued. Judge Winters has denied it. Says he needs to see substantial change before reconsidering the custody arrangement. Which won't happen, Colin noted. Not with what we know about her continuing contacts with Ryan through intermediaries. Ben raised an eyebrow. Diana is still monitoring? Some things are worth the ongoing expense, Colin replied. The children's safety isn't negotiable. After concluding their business, Colin walked Ben to the door. As they passed the living room, Ben paused, his gaze lingering on the family photos adorning the mantel. New ones showing Colin with the children at various activities, their faces happier and more relaxed than in earlier pictures. You've rebuilt well, Ben observed. Not many could have managed this outcome from such a disaster. Colin's expression remained neutral. I protected what matters, nothing more. After Ben's departure, Colin joined his children in the backyard. Sophie immediately dragged him into their snowman construction project, directing him to find suitable sticks for arms while Alex worked on packing snow for the head. Dad, can we invite Uncle Leo and his family for dinner tonight? Alex asked, his relationship with Colin having strengthened considerably over the months. The boy who had once been sullen and distant now regularly sought his father's approval and company. Sure, Colin agreed, helping to position the snowman's head. I'll call him after we finish this masterpiece. Sophie worked with serious concentration, her creativity flourishing in the months since the separation. The therapist Colin had engaged for both children had noted her resilience, along with her tendency to process emotions through art and imaginative play. Dad, does Mom ever ask about us? She asked suddenly, catching Colin off guard with the directness of the question. Colin crouched to her level, choosing his words carefully. She does. She asks the judge and the doctors when she can see you again. But she doesn't call, Sophie observed, or send letters. The court has rules about that right now, Colin explained, maintaining the careful narrative he'd established. Remember, Dr. Martinez talked about this. Mom needs to get better first. Sophie considered this, then nodded solemnly. Like when you're sick and have to take all your medicine before you can go back to school. Something like that, Colin agreed, relieved at her acceptance of the explanation. Alex, now 14 and a half, wasn't as easily satisfied. Later that evening, after dinner with Leo's family, he approached Colin in the study where Colin was reviewing plans for a new project. I found articles online, Alex said without preamble, about Mom and Ryan, about what they did. Colin set aside the blueprints, giving his son his full attention. I see. What questions do you have? They stole money, Alex stated, from lots of people, and they were going to blame you for it. Yes, Colin confirmed, seeing no reason to shield his son from facts he'd already discovered. They were... Alex struggled visibly with his next question. Would Mom really have let you go to prison while she and Ryan took us to Arizona? Colin considered softening the truth but decided against it. Alex deserved honesty. The evidence suggests that was their plan, yes. The boy sat heavily in the leather chair opposite Colin's desk, processing this devastating confirmation of his mother's betrayal. How can someone change like that? She was our mom. She used to make pancakes on Sundays and help with school projects. People are complicated, Alex, Colin replied carefully. Sometimes they hide parts of themselves for years. Sometimes they change when tempted by things they think they want more than what they have. Did you hate her? Alex asked. When you found out? Colin paused, considering the searing depth of emotion he'd experienced in those first days after the discovery. I was angry, disappointed, hurt, but mostly I was focused on protecting you and Sophie. By making sure she couldn't see us anymore. By making sure she couldn't hurt you anymore, Colin corrected gently. There's a difference. Alex nodded slowly. I used to be mad at you for breaking up our family, for making Mom leave. I know, Colin acknowledged. That was a normal reaction. But it wasn't your fault, Alex continued, meeting his father's eyes directly. You didn't break anything. They did. The simple statement, delivered with teenage directness, struck Colin more powerfully than he expected. For months, he had executed his carefully calibrated revenge without allowing himself to fully process the emotional aftermath. Hearing his son's absolution broke something loose inside him. Not forgiveness for those who had betrayed him, but perhaps the beginning of freedom from the cold rage that had driven him. Thank you for saying that, Colin said quietly. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Colin sat on the back porch. Despite the cold, he stared at the stars visible through breaks in the clouds. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana Frost. Final surveillance contract expires tomorrow. Renew? Colin considered the question. For 6 months, he had maintained comprehensive monitoring of Natalie's activities, partly as insurance against further schemes, partly as the final expression of his need for control in a situation that had once threatened to destroy everything. After several minutes of reflection, he typed his response. No renewal needed. Final report sufficient. The decision wasn't forgiveness. Colin Mercer did not forgive betrayal, but it was acknowledgement that the victory was complete. Natalie and Ryan would never recover from the destruction he had engineered. Their punishment would continue without his active participation. The next morning brought news that Ryan Patterson had attempted suicide in his cell after receiving word that his final appeal for leniency had been rejected. He had survived but would face his sentencing confined to the prison medical ward. Colin received the information from Leo with the same impassive expression he had maintained throughout the ordeal. Keep me updated, was his only response. At the construction site of his newest project later that day, a community center he had partly funded himself, Colin surveyed the progress with satisfaction. The foundation was solid, the framework rising true and strong against the Colorado sky. Fletcher Boyd approached, hard hat in hand. Structure's looking good, boss. We're ahead of schedule despite the weather. Excellent, Colin nodded. The children's wing is our priority. I want the roof sealed before the next storm system. As they walked the site discussing technical details and material deliveries, Colin found himself genuinely engaged in the work for the first time in months. The constant vigilance, the exacting execution of his revenge, had consumed mental energy he could now redirect toward building rather than destroying. That evening, as he helped Sophie with her science project, a model of the solar system that had overtaken the dining room table, he received a call from Vanessa Patterson. He stepped into the hallway to take it, his guard immediately raised. Colin, Vanessa's voice was strained. I thought you should hear this from me first. Natalie's gone. Gone where? He asked sharply. No one knows, Vanessa replied. She left a note saying she couldn't live with what she'd done anymore. Took her passport and the cash she had saved. The police are looking, but... Colin processed this development, calculating the implications for his children, for the legal arrangements he'd so carefully constructed. When did this happen? Last night, Vanessa said. After she heard about Ryan's suicide attempt, I've already notified the court through her attorney. After ending the call, Colin stood motionless in the hallway, absorbing the news. Natalie's disappearance was the final act in their tragedy. Neither victory nor defeat, but simply conclusion. Dad, Sophie called from the dining room. I need help with Neptune's rings. Coming, princess, he replied, setting aside thoughts of Natalie to focus on the daughter who needed him now. In the weeks that followed, life settled into new patterns. The police classified Natalie as a missing person but found no evidence of foul play. International border records eventually confirmed she had entered Mexico, then seemingly vanished, likely using the false identification documents Ryan had once procured for their planned escape. Colin explained her disappearance to the children as compassionately as possible, framing it as another symptom of their mother's problems rather than final abandonment. The family therapist helped them process their feelings, while Colin remained the constant, unfailing presence in their daily lives. 1 year to the day after the fateful trip to the cabin, Colin stood in his backyard, watching his children play with neighborhood friends. A barbecue sizzled nearby, attended by Leo and his wife, while other guests, colleagues, neighbors, parents of the children's friends, mingled on the patio. Diana Frost appeared at his side, a rare social appearance for the usually private investigator. "Quite a transformation," she observed, nodding toward Alex, who was laughing freely with friends. A dramatic change from the angry, withdrawn boy of a year earlier. "Children are resilient when they have stability," Colin replied. "And their father?" she asked perceptively. "Is he resilient too?" Colin considered the question seriously. "I've been called many things, ruthless, unforgiving, cold, but never weak." "That's not what I asked," Diana noted. Colin watched as Sophie ran to show him her latest artwork, a family portrait showing just the three of them, standing together under a bright sun. "I'm exactly who I need to be," he told Diana, accepting Sophie's drawing with genuine appreciation. "Someone who protects what matters, whatever it takes." The evening wound down as the sun set over Denver, casting long shadows across the yard where a new life had been carefully constructed from the ruins of betrayal. Guests departed with warm goodbyes, the children helped clean up without complaint, and the household settled into its comfortable routine. Later, alone in his study, Colin unlocked a drawer that contained the final surveillance report on Natalie, the last trace of the woman who had nearly destroyed everything he valued. After a moment's hesitation, he fed the pages into the shredder, watching as they disintegrated into unrecoverable fragments. The action wasn't forgiveness. Colin Mercer did not forgive betrayal, but it was acknowledgement that justice, cold, complete, and devastating, had been served. The past was finally where it belonged, behind them while he faced forward with his children beside him. In the quiet of the evening, Colin Mercer closed the drawer on the remnants of what had been and turned toward what would be, a future built with the same precision with which he had dismantled those who had dared to threaten what was his. Some would call it merciless. He simply called it cold justice.